Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Archer Report. I'm your host, Steele Archer, and we're with Roy from Mind Gap Podcast. But before we cross over to Roy, I have just a few quick things to talk about. Thrivus, Lincoln Cannon, we all know Thrivus, and we love Lincoln Cannon very much. He wants to give away more Thrivus to our viewers, so make sure that if you are sharing the video, leave a link in the description and follow the description. Underneath this video, there is a prize, a contest for sharing around the video. And Lincoln said, he wants more people to take advantage of that contest. So make sure you go and grab some Thrivus. Mike DeVerde, thank you very much. And I know Mike's become a good customer from Thrivus because it's a great product. Nootropics, geoprotectors, and other things. So check it out, and you will be pleasantly surprised. All right, so cool. All right, so Mind Gap. It's a new podcast on the scene, born out of pandemic-type circumstances, lockdown, etc. We're going to talk to one of the creators here, Roy. How are you, Roy? How's your day going?
My day's going okay. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. All right, so talk about your podcast. I saw you had Peter Zing on. Once you have Peter Zing, my antenna is to go up, and I track you all over the internet because Peter Zing is an exceptional person. He's a very talented, very smart, very skillful. He's a very prominent intellectual in the technology sphere, well thought out, well composed. So how did you meet Peter? Or let's talk about that interview with Peter for starters and your project Mind Gap, because I'm very excited. If this is how you're going to get rolling, this is very exciting for us.
Yeah, okay. So first of all, Peter, I met Peter through some articles on Facebook. I think I was just, because I would follow Ray Kurzweil, SpaceX, Elon Musk, that sort of thing. And I believe also, I was involved with Sydney Futurists many years ago because I would love to talk about these subjects, but none of my friends, they're nice people. I'm not going to say they're not nice people. They're beautiful people. My friends are beautiful people. They just don't like talking about this sort of stuff, except for two of my friends. So I just couldn't talk to people about all the stuff that I wanted to talk about. And I went to Sydney Futurists, and they had meetings where we would just talk about all of this stuff. And it was just so liberating to talk about all this stuff. And then I met Peter on Facebook and loved the articles he was sharing. And it just culminated into bringing him on the show when we started this podcast.
Well, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, the second question was how we started this. My associate, Simon Carter, who's just walked in.
Hello.
Hello, Simon. Hey,
Simon.
I wish we could switch cameras. I don't know if we can switch cameras, but anyway, he can pop in. We were working on making a podcast setup, and we just started tinkering, and we just did some test runs, and we loved it so much we just kept going.
Wow, that's right? Really cool. That's really fascinating. So let's talk about Sydney Futurists. What was that all about? It's obviously some sort of futurist community talking event thing. Let's talk about that. So what was the composition of that? What did you guys talk about there? What did you do there? Did you focus on Australia or international or technology or what?
We had the few meetings I went to, it was a lot about I think it was nanotech. There was a person whose field was cryonics, freezing people. So that was very interesting. And gene, I can't remember the term, but it's modifying the genes when it's in your body, like modifying
gene editing and gene therapy.
Could be, yeah.
Gene splicing, was it?
I can't remember the term they used, but yeah, something like that. And there was just a lot of really hard-hitting intellectual...
Genomics, maybe.
That's it, genomics. That's all right. That I just would just touch on, and I had very little knowledge of, and so I would just listen to these people like a sponge. I would soak up the info like a sponge and just spend the nights googling furiously of what they were talking about. So that was my introduction to the whole thing. The other thing was, Ray Kurzweil, the exponential growth of information technology, and that struck me as something amazing. And also Richard, I think it's Richard Feynman, no, not Richard, Eric Drexler, and I can't remember who it was, if it was that person or someone else at Xeon, at Palo Alto, Xerox Palo Alto Research, where they were constructing nano scale structures for the potential nano machines that would come out eventually. This was also very fascinating to me. Not to bore everyone. I don't want to bore everyone, so back to you.
No. It's a technology show, and everybody on this show, it's not only a technology show, but there are a lot of people who are fascinated and excited about advancements in technology, and you've already hit the ball out of the park with some great names. Ray Kurzweil, Eric Drexler, the Age of Spiritual Machines, for example. Richard Feynman, a great physicist in the United States, and a company. You're already off to a fantastic start, and we wish you all the best over at MindGap. It's interesting. We've talked to a good friend of ours here at the show, David Wood, Future Institute. He's one of these, runs one of these future technology. Well, he wants to be a transhumanist, essentially a transhumanist political party in the United Kingdom, out of London, talking a lot about the future and the exponential curve that's coming up. What do you find most? What do you like most about technology? Are you excited for any particular technology? Let's say driverless cars. Are you excited for that? Or are you excited for the anti-aging aspects of technology? Or we've already automated a lot of our labor force, so you don't have to work in a factory, for example. What are you excited about when it comes to technology?
Well, that's something that Peter Singh hinted last podcast. It was on the Mindcast podcast. He coined it as what was it? Something about communist luxury communism, fully automated luxury communism. And I looked up that term after the podcast, and it was a book or a paper written by someone, and it was about how the socialist structure that we would benefit from as with capitalism, it's the race to the top, and it kind of pushes all the money to just the few people at the top, and that trickle down economics. I don't know if I should bring that up, but that's kind of the Achilles heel of capitalism, I guess. How the majority or the bottom half just languish in the wilderness. So with that socialist underpinning, you could bring up kind of like have the best of both worlds. So the people that really want to shoot for the stars can do that, but also the people that either aren't intellectually persuaded to follow that path can still be relatively well off and live a fruitful life. I think that's something that really technology can bring about. Also, helping people medically in the medical field, helping prevent diseases, that sort of thing. I mean, I think Ray Kurzweil actually described the whole thing. It was in his book, but I can't remember the term. Do you remember the term he mentioned? It's something like delay aging or stop aging, robotics, and AI or something like that. And AI is really the advancement of robotics. And so our society would hopefully be pushed into a point where we have a benevolent AI structure around us that allows us to grow and advance to a higher form of consciousness and basically transhumanism in a nutshell. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, fully luxury automated communism, a very interesting concept. And I think I'm not sure if this is the term that Ray Kurzweil used, but what you're kind of talking about is the convergence of technologies converging, and coming to a point eventually of what we call the singularity, where technology grows itself out as an exponential force on its own, almost going vertical at some point. But before we get to there, yeah, we do have these problems with AGI and superintelligence and the other steps of AI before we get to AGI even. So yes, this is really a good point. This is a very, very interesting point. And you've already talked about nanotech and these other aspects of the future which are coming. So this is a very interesting point. Peter and I have always differed on this point. I'm not a communist. I would never say I was as a communist. I have different conceptions of
I've seen some of the Archer report. Yes.
yeah. And everyone knows that I'd say I'm a capitalist. That's well known. It's not a thing. But it doesn't matter at a certain point when you do get these AGIs and you do get the superintelligence at some point, because the limits, the scarcity limits start to evaporate, which starts to break down both conceptions of communism, socialism, and capitalism. It starts to fall away because these theories and structures are confined and conformed around points of managing scarcity and managing scarce resources, including ideas and including how to generate and what methods and methodologies we build up in order to generate new ideas and new foundational frameworks. And and we live in Australia, which is a mixed economy leaning on a socialist economy. And there's plenty of great things about this more mixed economy as well, including healthcare.
Yes.
Your nation should always be in control of its own healthcare, and I always boil this down to national security reasons, because if you sell out your healthcare, if you privatize your healthcare to foreign actors, those foreign actors will have direct control over the healthcare of your own citizens, and that's not what you want. So on something like healthcare, I think Australia has a very good model, and America does not have a great model on healthcare for national security, and then actually for efficiency reasons as well, because it boils down to a more equitable outcomes in the long run if you're talking about equability in your healthcare system. Now, if this was a one world government, there would be no argument for a sort of nationalized one world government healthcare system, because that would be inefficient. You actually need competition at that level, but we don't have that. We have a funny mixture of warring states all over the planet, and selling out your own healthcare system is not a viable option.
Yeah, I mean, there's very few things that are stronger than capitalism when it comes to making companies and organizations push the limits of technological growth. About the only thing I can think of is war. That's about the only thing stronger at the moment.
Yeah, and technology has eliminated a lot of war as well. I mean, since the invention of nuclear weapons, war has dropped from a constant in human history to near zero in historical terms. Near zero in historical terms. But this is something that's dropping away. Now, will that continue at that rate? No, I don't think so. I'm not optimistic like that. But for now, for the last second half of the 20th century up until now, war has diminished a lot.
Yeah, between first world countries, yes, definitely. And now we've only got proxy wars and wars between maybe a superpower and a very underfunded nation, that sort of thing, where the United States aircraft carriers with their force projection capabilities can, go in and mop up, that sort of thing. But I mean, I don't know too much about that. I just wanted to rattle that off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's cool. So what else do you guys want to do? What do you want to do with your Mind Gap podcast? Do you want to just keep interviewing really awesome, energetic people, or do you want to take it somewhere else? Or do you want to get more political or more economics or more technology based, or do you want to become Joe Rogan? I mean, what's your goals? What's your aspirations?
I don't think we necessarily have a limit. We want to do a bit of everything. Talk to everyone. We are very into technology though, so it'll probably be more focused on that. But come one, come all, pretty much.
Yeah, I think I don't know if we're in a position to dictate. Well, I mean, we want to talk about tech and the future, and basically what I guess when we were coming up with the name, we ended up with Mind Gap, and to us that name means just out of all of human knowledge, there's all of these things that aren't in the public's mainstream, as in esoteric bits of information about technology, medicine, physics, whatever. And talking about that can be interesting because people might come away from the talk and go, oh, I didn't see that point of view, or I didn't know about that technology. So that's kind of like where because we had so many names that just Mind Gap kept coming back, and we eventually settled on it. And that's what we like to talk about, the gaps in our knowledge, in the public knowledge.
And there's quite a few, especially from my point of view.
Yeah. Simon's the good thing about Simon is he comes from electronic. He's basically a licensed electrician, and his knowledge of he loves cameras and camera gear, but he doesn't know too much, like more than say the average person on SpaceX, futurism, and that sort of thing. So when we're talking about those things, he can chime in and say, this term, what is? Could you explain more about this term or that term? And he helps the general public who may not also be in the same boat as him to follow the conversation.
More with an engineering type approach to certain topics. Yeah.
Fantastic. And, I've always been fascinated by engineers. We have lots of engineers on this show. Engineers are really good at looking at problems and trying to devise solutions to different problems and different systems. And I think that's a very unique and beautiful skill that we have to have, because especially in today's politicized world where a lot of problems are politicized, from almost every angle, people are looking at things more and more from a racial perspective, from an economic, inequality perspective, or they're looking at it from a power perspective. You're from this country, you're from that country, and therefore now we're enemies, we're not. And so there's this sort of rise of tribalism across the world, and it's sort of locking people out of delivering and considering and projecting futures. But engineers have always somehow managed to sidestep these arguments and just look at problems and try and devise solutions to issues and problems. And I've always had a huge respect for engineers and problem engineers, solution engineers, philosophical engineers as well, who seem to just tend to ignore the politicization of the issues and try and say, okay, all right, how do we actually improve wealth inequality? How do we improve how do we educate people on the mind gap, for example, using your analogy there over at your podcast? How do we educate? How do we talk? How do we discuss? How do we bring about solutions to the problems at hand? And I've always enjoyed that, and I really want to encourage you guys to do very well and to keep it up. And if you want some great talking points. I mean, the Science Party in Australia has, which Peter Zing is definitely a member of, Science Party has a lot of people who are sort of crying out for a voice at this point in time. I'm always talking to the United States Transhumanist Party. We're going to be pushing for Charlie Cam to, for president of the United States on this channel. But there was a lot of people over at the Science Party. A lot of them are in Sydney, where I think you are in Sydney, who are really need a voice in the Australian sphere. And they actually did really well with Adam Hammond and Andrea Leong and others who have done really, really well in formulating a very solid political force with quite a solid base on a very hard subject structure there. So it's I would encourage you to look at the Science Party if you don't already know it. Sounds like you might already know it, but maybe reach out to those guys.
Okay, Science Party.
Yeah,
Just write that
awesome.
down.
Actually, that's an interesting point you brought up about the engineers coming from a electrician background. A lot of the engineered solutions that are come up with, I have sort of a different opinion because we are the end of the line actually got to make it work. So there's a lot of large construction buildings that I've worked on, and they'll engineer a solution which at the end of the day doesn't always actually function the way it's supposed to. And the end of the line people, the installers like us, have to sort of make it work. I'm not downplaying their knowledge or anything, but I come from the perspective of, at the end of the day, millions of dollars might go into this research and technology, but we sort of have to make it work, even though the solution is great, but at the end of the day, it doesn't always come out like that. And that's the approach I sort of bring to arguments like
you
that.
You sound like when you're on the Apollo 13 mission going to the moon, and the engineers, they did all the stuff, and you get up there on the mission and you're off to the moon, and then everything starts to break, and you've got to use sellotape to keep the ship up together, and use your own ingenuity and skill. It's a good analogy.
It's actually a trade secret. Silicon and cable ties, you can fix anything.
You can fix anything. Look, that brings up something that I remember. What's the difference between a scientist and an engineer? Remember the Demon Core? The Demon Core was a nuclear core of plutonium that the scientists would test.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that Demon Core must have been built by a scientist, because an engineer would have made it so that if the two cores accidentally fell, it would fall away from each other. That's the difference. So the scientist just cares that it works. The engineer makes sure that it fails safe.
Yeah,
Right.
fault find stuff.
So that's a good point, Simon.
Yeah. It's just a different approach. Everyone brings different approaches to things. It's
Yes.
quite interesting to see different people's background expertise talking about a specific topic, because everyone brings a different side to the argument, sort of thing. Well, discussion. Let's not say argument.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that's a really, really healthy debate. And it's people like you and your podcast that I reach out to people like you yourself and your podcast ideas, because we need much more, and I mean in a big way. I'm stuck in a bit of a tech bubble. Peter Zing, my friend, he's stuck in a bit of a tech bubble. We know most of the people in there, and it's not a large circle, and it's impacting everybody more and more and more and more and more. And yet we don't have the proper discussions and debate about technology that we really should be having at this day and age, especially as Roy was saying, he was talking about AI, the advancement of AI, and the inevitability of it, and a super intelligence at some point, whether that's in this century or not. That's still within the limits of a human lifespan, or at least a couple of generations. Some people are very, very more optimistic on that, saying it's 2029, 2035, 2045, no later than 2050. So these projections, I mean, they're all over the place, but you have something as enormous as that barreling down on us as a species, and yet we still can't get over very nuanced debates of politics and how to run society, and how to agree or not agree, or even how to have civil debates. And technology has been affording us a lot of these platforms, but we are bumping up against the first lesson of technology. And I think this is social media right now. I think social media is a double-edged sword. Yes, it does connect us all. Yes, it makes us all sort of aware of the world, and it enhances communication between friends, family members, and groups. But it also can give individuals a great amount of power. Fake news, misinformation, algorithmic tribalism can rise up, where people are fed the news and substance and arguments that they want to be fed and want to have confirmation bias. Obama and Trump, whether you like either one of them, would not have risen up to the amount of power they did without the advent of social media. So if you like Trump, the same tools that gave, if you like Obama, the same tools gave Trump the ability to do it. And who's to say what could happen next? So, technology is a double-edged sword. It's how we use it. It's what we do with it. But what do you guys have to say on social media? You're using social media and the technology of microphones and the internet and all this sort of stuff. What do you guys think of social media?
About your point about the about Obama and Trump. From my understanding, so if you type in some things into Facebook about Trump, the Facebook algorithm will feed you more information that is maximized to, I guess, trigger you in a certain way that you will continue to use Facebook. Basically, they want you to stay on Facebook for the maximum amount of time possible, rather than an algorithm that picks out something that, this will be beneficial for you, or this is something that will make you feel better or will help you in some way. No, the algorithm is, let's get this person stuck on here for as long as possible. And I think that is ultimately destructive. Not destructive, but it's self-serving to Facebook, and that's fine, because Facebook is doing what Facebook needs to do. It's in a capitalist system. It needs to put itself and its shareholders first. And I think that's what's the mandate for a company and a corporation. You have to do that anyway. So I think it's up to the regulators to decide, how what are the boundaries and what rules they have to play by, and then other people have to play by. I think that's also the reason why Elon Musk left the AI board. I can't remember which board it was, but for the self-driving cars, in case of the trolley scenario. What was it, trolley scenario? Where will the car hit a pedestrian, or will it swerve and kill the driver? That scenario. And that's kind of like an AI edge case, where is the AI software going to preserve the driver, or is it going to kill someone on the road? And if you bought a Tesla, you would want the Tesla to preserve the Tesla owner's life, and that's something that you shouldn't be involved with if you are making cars. You shouldn't be involved with what the AI decides if you're making cars. So that's kind of like what I think. These Facebook algorithms, as far as social media goes, there should be more guidelines. We should figure out the guidelines for this, and then get those put in place. Maybe Facebook shouldn't be the one deciding how its customers are fed information. Maybe that has to be done by an independent authority. I don't know. This is all really, really early on stuff. I mean, we don't even know what's going to happen when these self-driving cars, get a traffic ticket. Who's gonna get the ticket? We may have to figure out a third entity. There's a human being, there's a corporation, and then there's an AI. Don't know.
That's true.
This is some good points. Who's responsible? Is the company responsible for bad programming? Is the AI responsible for its own logic sequence? Are you responsible for the way you've put it into the destination, or are you fell asleep even though that's legal, and you weren't watching the road, and therefore you're responsible? All of these are really, really good points. Or is the government responsible, for not innovating and making roads safe for AI cars, or mandating enough of them so that they can all work in tandem? And keeping the satellites safe. And we have a lot of shows here now, and the space industry is growing. It's growing on leaps and bounds. Very excited about the space industry, but with the invention of Space Force, a new arm of the military, and China and Russia increasing their deployments of anti-satellite space, anti-satellites in space. If we all do have self-driving cars, no more road crashes or anything, and then we knock the satellites out of space, that takes the whole network down. You could end up with a super crash, stuff like this. So defense procurements against things like anti-satellite, if we're talking about space, and it wouldn't only be to do with the roads. It would be to do with things like Starlink and internet, broadband internet being beamed across the world. This is super important stuff, and this is why I'm saying, we really enjoy your enthusiasm in the technological sphere, ethical sphere, philosophical sphere in this area, because this is not being widely discussed. These implications, and especially in Australia, because we are, as you know, riding between the United States, which we seem to be edging towards for security purposes, but also between China for economic purposes. And
Yes.
who are we going to pick? Well, I think in the long run, we're going to pick the United States. But, what does that mean for technologies that are going to be developed in their own bubble in China? Are we going to be locked out of those? Looks like we are going to be locked out. So therefore, we can only really talk about American technology. But is that how it has to be? No. But does that how it seem at this point in time? Yes.
Well, I agree that these technologies are racing forward, and we are benefiting from them immensely. And there's going to be some huge technological races, and also. To your point about these systems failing, like Starlink, etc., I think that is one of the good things about capitalism, how you're going to have multiple companies, say, producing their own networks, and therefore providing literally layers of redundancy. And you're going to have different protocols with a trademarking system and different IP, intellectual property rights, allowing those formats to be rolled out independent of each other, and they will compete in the global marketplace for dominance, and therefore also providing a level of redundancy, something that will be lacking if those things were all socialized and were all done by the government. So I see capitalism playing a huge role, but also socialism. Well, I don't want to say socialism, but socialist underpinnings, kind of bringing up the rear, especially with China being communist. I mean, they're leveraging that completely. They've just, everyone's now in cashless society. It's I think I saw a video, I'm not sure if it's I just saw a video about, they make transactions with facial recognition. So you're not even using your phone anymore. It's everyone's digitized and recognized with AI, and that's a bit scary. But I mean, they can do that because of the form of government. So we'll just have to see.
But speaking on the advancements of technology, I've done a lot of work in the telecommunication space, mainly with aerial inspections of the towers and so forth. And it's funny because there is a monopoly in certain industries, and one of, if not the most biggest providers of telecommunication equipment is notorious for equipment failure, but they're pretty much one of the biggest suppliers and
Cisco?
don't have any competition.
Is this Cisco?
No.
Okay.
No. I won't mention specifically
mention
the
the names.
brand, but they're notorious for equipment failure, but they have no competition. And as someone who's actually installing this equipment, they're notoriously bad for equipment failure, but they have no competition.
Okay. He's talking about a government-funded telecommunications giant in Australia, I think.
Does it start with a...
Something like...
All of them. It's actually all the networks. But no. This is the equipment supplier that is based in China.
Sorry. I thought you were talking about something else.
Their equipment is notorious for equipment failure, but there is no alternative.
Yeah, it's a natural monopoly, and just going back to what Roy was saying, and I'll talk about what you're talking about here as well. Is it Steve? I forgot your name.
Oh, sorry. This is Simon.
Simon, right? I'll come back to that point. That's a great
Yeah, no,
point. And you're on the ground there installing this faulty equipment. But I'll come back to that in a sec. But just going back to what Roy was saying, I'm a pragmatist as well. And if you want to talk about government achievements, it's the government that first got the Soviet Union, for example. It was the government system that first got Sputnik into space. That wasn't a capitalist. That wasn't some entrepreneur coming out of nowhere and launching the first satellite into space. And then on the flip side of that, it was also the American government that got their version of the first satellite into space as well. So if you want to talk about who broke ground, Galileo or Captain Cook, he was part of a government project, or any of these explorers, most of them were part of a government project. And a lot of the subsequent exploration of the Earth came as part of the British East India Company or European or other projects that were part of already government explored areas, because the government is a big force multiplier and it has the resources because it has domestic issues to do that. So being a pragmatist as well, and it wasn't a private entrepreneur who was talking about the space shuttle. That was NASA. That's a government project, right? The corporations waited a long time until the late 2010s, early 2010, 2012, 2013, before they even started to really come on board at being a commercial space enterprise. And it wasn't until reusable rockets now corporations are on board saying, okay, now we can do it at a lower cost. So I am a pragmatist. We just did the Mars Hope mission here in the UAE, over there in the UAE. Again, that was a government mission to send a government project to Mars. It wasn't a private mission. It wasn't a corporate mission. So you are correct. And I might say I'm a capitalist, but also I'm a pragmatist. And also I look at the world as it really is. And these government-funded projects, you're talking about genomics, the gene editing, gene sequencing stuff. That was all government-funded projects. So the government is notorious for breaking ground in areas that are not profitable, that may never yield a return, and all these other things, because they have these funds, they have these domestic problems, they have whatever's going on in their constituency in order to do it. And it's not, the corporations which you're talking about are much better at marketing and much better at saying, look what we've done, look what we've achieved. So I would never say that corporations always do the hard work and they always do it, because that's simply a lie. That's false. It's evidently objectively false in that way. But it's a great point, and that's why when we do go around advocating to governments about these projects, we have to always remind them that it's usually the government projects. They can yield the most return, but they have to go and take the risk and sometimes put all these sunk costs in something that might never yield anything. Nuclear fusion, the nuclear fusion idea, we're talking about nuclear fusion and nuclear fission.
Yes.
For interstellar travel or massive energy projects, it may never work, but yet governments are pouring billions and billions of dollars into trying to get this developed. It's not some private entrepreneur or some billionaire or tech company. So it's a great point.
Well, yes, you're right. I should qualify those points by saying, corporations and capitalism is good for streamlining efficiencies in say rocketry or whatever, and governments are good at taking initial risks when it is politically feasible to do so. So I mean, the moment that people say, oh, why are we sending people up into space when we've got people, homeless people on the street, that's when it just
And you're right, and that's what happened big time. That's what happened with the moon missions. The moon missions were going well. The Apollo missions were going well. And then if you look at the 70s, there were exactly like you said. There were people protesting all over the place, saying billions for the moon, nothing for the homeless. So this is absolutely a vital point.
Yeah. So I mean, but yes, we should see that these are nuanced. These things that we've got, corporations, government, they have their role to play, and we have to qualify those statements by saying yes, governments can do it when it's politically feasible. Corporations can pick up the slack and turn something like the space shuttle into a feasible economic reality. And the irony was that the space shuttle was supposed to be reusable. That was the whole point.
It's genius. It was a big flop. The space shuttle was a big flop, but it was actually on the right track, and I really applaud the effort. But it just didn't work.
That's right. Well, NASA was made to get something to the moon, but it wasn't built to make it cheap. So,
And Simon, you were talking about this monopoly, monopoly the Australian government has with this one supplier, and their equipment is deficient. Have you got any solutions to remedy that?
Well, I mean, if there's no competing manufacturer, there's not a lot that can be done. But I can tell you firsthand that the major supplier of telecommunications that is installed in this country is notorious for just bad quality. And there's not a lot of, there's no other competitive products on the market, really. There probably are, but at a higher expense. It becomes quite frustrating when the end installer, so sort of myself and my colleagues, are installing this equipment knowing that it's probably going to fail, reporting that it's not, it meets all the codes and all that, but it just keeps failing. But there's no alternative. But if they're the market leader in the technology and there's no competition, even knowing that there's issues with the quality of the equipment, we're kind of limited in what we can do with that. Because the telecommunications...
Could any of your parts that you're describing be 3D printed?
It's more so the hardware. Okay. So just the telecommunication hubs and the actual hardware itself.
Maybe eventually that could be 3D printed with advancements in 3D printers.
Yeah, possibly, but it's mainly the circuitry is just not up to par.
Okay.
But I mean, if electrical devices, if they pass their CE certification and so forth, yep, they're fine. But when there's constant failures, we'll install the equipment that we're given, but when you note that there's an issue, but there's no alternative, then that's where, the advances in technology are sort of lacking, because the telecommunication space is a billion-dollar industry. So the research and development would take years, I would imagine. But if there's no alternatives, then that becomes a bit of an issue. And just as I said, coming from that electrical background, you notice things that other people go, oh, I thought, there'd be a lot of different brands and blah, blah, blah. Well, it's actually a bit of a monopoly on the equipment. Is
that because of trademarks or is that because, well, it's China? No, it wouldn't be trademarks. Why is it just because they make it cheaper or?
I don't know. There'd probably be some corporation agreements that will install this technology and blah, 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 which is all well and good. But when the end installer is going, these keep breaking, the quality is not that good, these billion-dollar contracts, you get a few electricians going, hey, this stuff isn't very good. Well, they're not going to really take our advice on board. You know what I mean? which really, at the end of the day, you need to get advice from your sort of end users, you know. I would imagine.
You know a lot about electricity, the electrical circuits and stuff, and a lot of technology. Most of the technology runs off electricity. Just staying with you for a second, Simon. What do you think about the prospects of and the future of renewable energy, especially in Australia? Are you positive on hydro, solar, wind, wave power, and geothermal? What are you positive on any of these? Do you think any of these are practical, or should we just stick with coal? Should we develop nuclear? What's your idea on renewable energy, especially in Australia?
Well, solar is becoming very popular. And initially there were a lot of government rebates, which made it appealing to the end user. But
Yes.
the effect of it has sort of been reduced because people aren't sort of installing it from a nationwide perspective of the more we have, the more beneficial it is for the environment and the actual network, because it takes the strain away from generating electricity. But personally, for me, I'm not overly familiar with it, but I reckon here in Australia, wave technology, I really think we should employ a lot more than that, because the electricity it takes to run one of the wind generators, they're not cost effective. They don't generate enough electricity to barely self-manage themselves. And that's quite widely known. Well, in the industry, that the wind generators aren't actually that effective. But I just think the opportunity to put in these wave generators in the sea, because that's constant flow, because motion, you can translate that into electricity or generate electricity. I really think that's something we should explore a bit more, considering that we're surrounded by water, and that actually does generate quite a decent amount of electricity. But the infrastructure to put in one system is quite significant. But I think that's sort of a technology that hasn't been
fully exploited.
No. I think there's a lot of benefits there.
Wow, and what do you think about nuclear? I like wave technology as well. I've seen a lot of coal industry people come out, especially against wave technology, try and almost silence wave, which makes me very suspicious that it might be very effective. But what do you think about nuclear power? Are you bullish on nuclear? Do you think Australia should lift some nuclear restrictions?
Well,
that's a big can of worms right there.
Yeah. It is the most effective. That's fact. But it's
politically, it's also
waste. Like a wave generator, apart from being in the seawater and degradation and your metal rusting and so forth, that's something to consider. But nuclear can generate exponential amount of electricity, but it has significant downfalls. So
with the old style implementation, yes.
Yeah, I would err on the side of caution and think there are better methods. I would sort of steer clear of that, just because of the long-term effects. I don't think nuclear really is the way to go. Do you
mean waste in terms of the nuclear waste end product? I mean, with reusable rockets, we could just blast it out to space. Do you think so or not?
Short term, you wouldn't get the effects of that. Like if we just shoot all our waste into space, it won't be an issue for like our kids' generation even.
That's an expensive way to get rid of waste.
But eventually,
yeah,
things have fallen back to earth, and you wouldn't want that to just fall in the ocean. But yeah, I don't think nuclear is a way to go. I don't think so.
All right, so wave power, solar power obviously is a big one, and for the planet, it's obviously solar power in space. That's 24 hours a day, that's 7 days a week. There's no dust. Yeah. You can beam it down with microwave energy. What will you say to that as a planetary solution? Solar panels in space?
Well, I mean, they implement those now, and the refining of the actual solar panels from what it was just a few years ago to what it is now, the amount of efficiency you get out of these new panels, yes, like anything, they're more expensive, but you've got to weigh up cost versus end result, in my opinion. Just because something's, you've got something that's cheap, something that's expensive. Why would I buy the expensive one? Well, longevity, quality of the equipment, and the actual output that you get out of it. Because two identical panels could give significant different readings. And solar panel is great in the daytime, but at the nighttime, not so much. And now the majority of solar that like my colleagues put in is mainly, they don't necessarily just go back to the grid. They install battery systems at residential and commercial properties. So it's not just generating electricity and then the electrical providers reimburse for the extra usage. They're installing batteries so that you could have a property where it's got panels on the roof, and then at night it can be self-sufficient instead of just generating electricity that they don't use. But now, usually as part of an installation, they'll include batteries with the system. Not always, but it's just a more efficient way of doing it.
Right.
Wow, that's some really, really good information there, and thank you for sharing that with us. I think solar panels in space is the way to go. Solar power, solar technology obviously has some more innovation to go. We can get it a bit cheaper. Unfortunately, it is a bit environmentally destructive to process and manufacture.
Yes,
unfortunately,
yes, to manufacture the panel, it's not like, oh, this is the best thing for the environment. No, that's not actually true. And well, yes, you're aware of that also. To manufacture the panels isn't the cleanest process, but the benefits, it's always, what's the lesser evil? To make something that's environmentally friendly in a way that isn't environmentally friendly, do you bother? So those are the sort of questions, that these engineers, occasionally the bane of our existence, because like, all right, you've designed this thing, it doesn't work, we're going to have to modify it to make it work. And I'm sure all the Sparkies out there will probably agree, but these are the people who design these things. So I'm not taking any credit away from them, but I'm saying sometimes to make stuff work, what you see on paper doesn't always work. You know what I mean?
Like the internal combustion engine.
We'll leave climate change for a second, and we'll move over to, because you're an electrician, and I'll bring Rob back on this one, unless you wanted to say anything else about that conversation. But what do you say for the advancement of smart homes? You're working with homes and buildings and things. What would you say about smart homes, Simon? Do you see a structural change, engineering change, integration of smart technologies? For example, you talk about lights or cooking appliances, or AI integration like Google Home and things. Are you seeing changes in the way people are thinking about home architecture using technology?
It is more common on a lot of new properties now. They will install smart systems, which is usually referred to as a CBus system. So you can control, via a tablet, your lights, your air conditioning, various things around the home, pretty much any electrical device. And especially with large corporate office fit outs, they're all controlled usually from a hub type system, so iPad or main control computer. But yes, the smart homes are definitely more prominent nowadays and getting more and more so as time goes on, because everyone wants the latest technology.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't say from the perspective of how reliable is it. Anything network based can have issues. I'm always an advocate for hardwire everything because it's literally there. Because you can always have network problems. So I would always try and hardwire everything. But with those particular systems, they're all sort of like some form of wireless connectivity. But yes, definitely everyone is heading towards, the implementation of smart home technology.
If you wanted to come in on that, Rob, as well, but did you find any interesting areas that maybe we're not thinking about in new projects? Maybe smart technology in your shower or for your toilet, or installing a smart toilet, or are people building robot Roomba holes for their vacuum cleaners? Are we not thinking about something that those people are doing on those sites now that you're seeing?
In the last 6 months or so, I've been privy to a lot of these technologies in my job, because we are shooting some product videos for these things in the coming months, and there's a lot of amazing things coming out. Like, I couldn't believe the stuff that's coming out. Just everything, all the appliances are now, like, I guess 5G connected. You've got the entire lighting system of a home. You've got cameras, the internet, and the smart hub. And there's just a lot of players. There's food from China. I know Google's into it as well. And I think it's going to be a huge race. And I think it's technically already started, but I think it's maybe towards the end of this year will start to really become prevalent when the videos start to come out.
Yeah, and it's going to save you money too if you install these projects, because these smart homes usually optimize everything. If you don't have much food in the fridge, it won't power your fridge to the same extent that an empty, things like this, or it'll dim your lights or turn them off if you've left, or it's going to save you money in the long run to optimize your home, but also reduce energy costs and save the environment as well, so we don't have to use as much coal. So these are really, I think they're good prospects, because people aren't just going to stop living in houses, are they?
No, I don't believe so.
Let's go and move into igloos. No. But to the point about nuclear energy and whether Australia, can I chime in on that?
Sure.
Okay. Well, if we ignore the geopolitical situation, where that's a different kettle of fish, but if, let's say, that was all sorted, I guess because Australia has more uranium reserves than the rest of than anyone else. We're kind of like the Middle East of nuclear repositories, and we're also the best continent positioned to even take care of nuclear waste. We're in the driest continent, bar Antarctica. We're in a continent that's smack bang in the middle of a tectonic plate. The continent shifts very slowly, and also the continent is designed very strange. Well, not designed. It's laid out in a very strange manner, in that all the rainfall just leaves the center of the continent. So the center of the continent remains dry even if there's rain. So if you placed, say, something in the groundwater in the middle of the continent, I think it was said it would take 20,000 years before it reached the edge. I can't remember where I read that, but something like that. So nuclear waste being stored at the center of the continent is, well, I think there's a lot of potential there. But saying that, I'm not, I just, the way that nuclear technology has been implemented is not very reassuring. The nuclear technology is great and the power output's great and it can be very environmentally friendly if we have it in a way that's fail-safe. And that's from the running of the generation all the way to the processing, all the way to nuclear proliferation. There's nothing worse than, having nuclear reactors scattered across the entire country, and all another country has to do is bomb those nuclear reactors and you're gone. I think it's the United States, all they have to do is bomb 3 nuclear reactors and the whole country, the whole West Coast is just uninhabitable. I mean, you can't have that. That's just they have to sort out those issues. But if they can sort out those issues, then yeah, it will be fantastic. It'll be great in space if they can get that into space, especially on the moon. That would be a good source, and they've already got them in satellites as isotope nuclear decay. I can't remember the term. It was powering Voyager as well.
Isn't there a current space race for space mining of space rocks or something?
Yeah,
there's a big hoo-ha, and yet again, what's prevalent in the media just magically turns up on Facebook. I got a ton of things recently. Space mining is the latest thing. Is it? I never heard of it. Oh, yeah, righto.
Yeah, well, a space mining idea is taken off since you reusable rockets, because it drops the cost right down of it costs a delivery cost of everything. So you can start sending probes out at much cheaper cost, and start mining some of those multi-trillion-dollar asteroids out there, which all have all sorts of rare earth minerals inside of them, including uranium, including everything that you can think of, titanium and unobtainium. Yes. Is that a real thing, unobtainium? I don't know, but I think it might be. But yeah, it has all sorts of gold and silver, everything you can think of. So that's why suddenly all of the space mining things have popped up. That's kind of interesting, and the governments, Russia, China, and America keep pushing this idea, of an asteroid hitting Earth. It's only relevant if something's going to hit us that we don't know about. That's a long way outside of, because it's traveling towards us too fast or something. Any other slow-moving asteroid, even relatively slow-moving asteroid with reusable rockets drop down, is very easy to deflect. You don't need to send a team out and blow it up with a nuke or anything like that. It's become quite easy to deflect because of our understanding of space-time. All you need to do is send a small satellite out, get it in elliptical orbit, and start maneuvering the space-time and pulling it off orbit around it. So that is our self-defense force. That is our Earth defense force against incoming asteroids. But, Virgin Galactic and stuff like that, one of the big reasons that they've had problems is because initially they wanted to pull these asteroids into Earth orbit and then let them orbit around Earth and mine them from an Earth orbit, and that freaked a lot of people out.
That's nuclear capability right there. But I mean, that brings up a lot of issues. I mean, what if, let's say, there is a asteroid that is about to hit Earth? I mean, with a NEO, near Earth orbit system, they can monitor like lots of near Earth objects, but we can't monitor half of them on the other side of the sun. Literally can't. I mean, so what if there is a asteroid and the next revolution around the sun, it is on a collision course with Earth? And what if, say, I'm not going to say China, let's say a Canadian satellite is able to nudge it so that it doesn't hit Canada, but it hits New York now? What do you do?
Well, yeah, this is what we've talked about with Malik. This is a really good hypothesis and one that should be put to international lawyers, and this is why it's the debates that we should be having. It had Malik on. She's a space lawyer, and they're always going on about the space treaties and how the treaties have banned essentially the weaponization of space. But if you've done something in a sneaky way of what you're talking about, where you've just nudged an inanimate, natural space object and used it for unpeaceful purposes, what treaty and what law does that fall under, and how much, quote unquote, didn't you mean to do that? How do you prove that somebody meant to accidentally knock it and hit New York, as was in the analogy there? So that's some very good stuff, and I would love to see MindGap talking to some international space lawyers on this issue, and bring up that exact that topic, because these space treaties, they're very good. I've read some of them, but there are gaps in things like that. So this is very, very good.
Yes, and I mean, if you do that maneuver on the other side of the sun, no one's going to know who did it.
So when you're talking about in relation to sort of space law and stuff, is that like who owns the moon? So just because America went there and put a flag on there, they don't own it.
Yeah. And
you know what I mean? Like, that's interesting. Who owns the moon?
There's also no war. You're not supposed to have any war.
Oh, well, international.
Yeah, it's
intergalactic, isn't it? Intergalactic law. Let's get into that.
Let's get into that.
Yeah. So this is what they talk about. We do have these essentially non-proliferation treaties. These treaties that sort of treat it as a national park. It's no nationalism. It's the sort of the realm of all humanity for peaceful purposes, for scientific advancement. Sometimes they have economics in there. The economics is kind of iffy, because a lot of people say if you do mine these asteroids, for example, that's economic colonialism. You're doing into space what we did on Earth, where we go out and use the natural resources for our own benefit, and that's bad. And some people say, no, they're just rocks. Don't worry about it. Go and do that anyway. The ability, the Fermi paradox obviously is something really important we have to consider. Why isn't there intelligent life out there? But what if we do run into life? What if there's intelligent life or non-intelligent biological creatures on these rocks, or on Mars, or on any of the other celestial objects? Does anybody own them? Do they have sovereignty? Should we explore them and examine them in a scientific way? Should we not? And a lot of these space treaties try and deal with these questions in some sort of way. But the undermining of the treaty is a lot of the big national powers haven't signed up to them, and Trump is pulling away with Space Force. So now you will see transhumanists and a lot of people in the science community and the community very divided on Space Force. On one hand, Space Force is going to do things that outside of the remit of what a lot of nations were capable of, because America felt like it's being held back by these treaties. It feels like it's got the capability to do so much more, and it's being confined, and that's why it's breaking out. But a lot of other people say, well, it's going to disobey these laws, and now space is up for grabs in terms of weapons, in terms of colonialism, in terms of unmitigated exploitation. And then the other people say, no, Space Force is good because it's going to propel humans into space settlements, and we will keep the United Nations treaties and charters, in a relative sense, within the United States sort of framework of freedom and democracy and human rights and all these other things, and therefore these space settlements and these moon settlements and all these other things are going to be okay. It might just work. It's really a public debate. Space Force has changed the debate.
I mean, if there was no China, no UAE, no European Union going into and Japan going into space in a big way, into the moon, into Mars, we wouldn't. I don't think we'll have Space Force. I mean, whoever controls that realm, whoever controls space in a big way, is going to be the superpower of the future, and hands down. You can have every nuke on the planet. If you have rockets trumps nukes, rockets trumps aircraft carriers. Hands down. Like, you cannot beat rockets. You know, if they want to get rid of you, the rocket is the biggest deterrent.
Well, actually, I'd be keen to get your opinion on this. I asked Peter Zing the same question, that when it comes to like space travel and so forth and recognition of achievements in the technology space, would you agree like with the statement that Russia doesn't seem to get the acknowledgement they deserve? Because Russia's always doing space-related things and having advancements in just, you know, general technology, but they never seem to get the recognition for it. That's just my opinion, but what's your take on that?
I totally agree. The Soyuz projects have always been far ahead of their time. As we discussed earlier, Sputnik was the first. I mean, well done, the Russians. They also sent the first man to space, and they've done a lot. I mean, the Soviets, I guess the same people, now called Russians, but the Soviets and the Russians have made a lot of advancements in space. They've collaborated with a lot of their former colonies. They've had to build a lot of their technology indigenously. They haven't had a lot of the international cooperation because of the Cold War. They were locked out. They locked each other out of technological sharing, which means that there was silos of innovation going on both in the United States and their allies, and Russia and the Soviet Union and their allies. So I totally agree with you. Unfortunately, Russia's about to drop off the space race. You won't hear about it much anymore. Because A, it's running out of money. B, it's running out of engineers. We talk often about the decline of Russia on this show, and one of the big declining factors of Russia as it stands is when it dissolved from being the Soviet Union in the 90s, after a lot of sort of like this Operation Paperclip. A lot of the Russian engineers and scientists, they left to work in other places. I went to America. I went to Europe and other places, South America, a lot of places all over the world. So a lot of brain drain happened in the 90s, and also their education system stuttered and failed, and they didn't really intergenerationally pass on a lot of their technological know-how to younger Russians. So if you actually look at the median age of Russian engineers, Russian scientists, all of these type of Russian technocrats who actually know how to make the space race work, how to fix the equipment, how to build rockets, how to do all of this amazing stuff that Russians have always done up until this year. Even including a lot of the arms stuff. You're talking about strategic ballistic missiles, ICBMs, and all the other things that they built. All those Russians are now getting older. They have an alcohol problem. They're actually about to pass away. They're 59, they're 60, they're 61, they're 62. The average age of a Russian male, 65, 68, 70. They don't live much longer than that. And they're all about to go into retirement anyway. So Russia as a whole country, because it has it's as an alcohol problem, it has an intellectual problem, an education problem, it has a demographic problem with all of these intelligentsia being a certain age. They're all declining now as they all pass over the edge, and they're not passing on those skill sets. So the space race, the ICBM race, the AI race, a lot of this is collapsing in Russia, and Russia's not going to be very much on the agenda when we talk about innovations or power projection or anything anymore. The only reason you see this sort of last burst of energy from Russia is because they have, from 2020, the demographics are shifting now. They have until about 2025 to either capture Ukraine or not. If they capture Ukraine, there's about 80 million people in Ukraine or less, a bit less, a bit more. And that will boost their demographics. They'll take a lot of computers. They'll take a lot of people. There's, Belarus is another one that they want back into the fold. They have to take back a lot of their old former Soviet-occupied places in order to survive as a country. But Russia, as you think of it, is declining from now till 2025. It's pretty much stuffed. So unfortunately, I agree with the premise of the question and the statement that Russia has never had the recognition for most of its space-based projects, or its AI projects, or its computer projects, or it's marvelous chess players, or anything. But unfortunately, it's really declining now, and they have to either use the military now, between now and 2025, while they can, to capture some of the old former Soviet Union states back, or they'll disappear forever off the planet. And you've seen some of that with Syria. You've seen some of that with Libya. You've seen some of that with Ukraine. A little bit of posturing in Ukraine. They can't do too much because of NATO and because of the continual push by NATO to keep these out. But even with this revolution in the last few days in Belarus, he's a very pro-Russian. He's Yuri Lukashenko, or whatever his name is known to be very pro-Russian. So maybe you will see some sort of energy there. But Russia needs to do something now, and it needs to do something dramatic and drastic. Otherwise, yes, they'll fall off into the abyss.
I mean, they're I think there's 125 million people in Russia.
150, something like that.
Is it 150?
Wow.
They have a GDP not even twice that of Australia.
Yeah.
Jesus.
It's because they're a commodity power. The only thing that they sell is gas, to Europe or sometimes China, and they have raw materials like metals and iron ores and other things like that. They don't really have anything else to sell or offer the world. They don't have oil. They don't have intelligence.
I thought Russia was always a big provider of manufacturing. I thought there was a lot of manufacturing there. No.
Stalin killed all that. Stalin killed all of that. Stalin killed all the people, and he killed all their manufacturing. The basis. They don't have that.
They were a superpower, weren't they?
The Kalashnikov. They export that. I knew their famous AK-47. Yeah.
It's a very good gun, apparently. Very, very effective weapon. One of the best ever built.
Never used one, but yeah.
It shoots sideways. Okay. I was going to mention something, but I forgot now. But,
about Russia or about something else? You were talking about the economic size of Russia.
Oh, yeah, it was before that, but it's fine. No, this was very interesting. I was looking up something while you were talking to see if I was right about something, but I can't remember what it was.
Well, we were talking about space.
Yes. I was just going to say Russia was the whole reason we had the space race was because Russia made so many incredible strides in the beginning with Sputnik, Yuri Gagarin, and the first person to walk in space, the first person to be in space. Oh, wait, maybe the first person to walk in. Yes, the first person to do a spacewalk was also Russian, if I remember.
But I guess if you speak to most people, they'll go, "Oh, first people on the moon. Yeah, it was Bud. Well, not Bud Lightyear. What's his name?
Buzz Aldrin.
Neil Armstrong.
Yes, you're right. Cosmonaut Alexei Leonov was the first spacewalk. So Russia.
Wow. Yeah, but I reckon the general public will go, "Oh, yeah, it was the Americans."
Wait a minute. Sputnik was the first satellite to go around. What was the first American satellite to go around?
It was about a year later. I'm not sure what that was.
No one cares about second.
No
one cares about second. So the fact that we know about Sputnik and Yuri Gagarin and all that,
it was called Explorer 1, according to NASA here. I just quickly Googled it. Explorer 1 was the first satellite launched by the United States when it was sent into space on the 31st of January, 1958.
Jeez.
Okay.
They could do that back in the 50s, and yet we've had some major advancements in technology, but not like
not
that much.
Competition.
the knowledge and the materials available, they were still able to do that.
Yeah, but
and
plus
you'd think we'd be that much more advanced.
We had a war. We had World War II.
Oh, well, yeah, that happened.
You bring up a very good point. I mean, the idea, you know, if you look at a lot of the science fiction of the 60s, of the 70s, even the 50s, moon bases, people living in space, space tourism, Mars was on the agenda. Robots.
Something. Keep going.
Robots in every home. This was pretty normal, saying that we are going to achieve something brilliant here, and we're going to do it quite quickly and quite soon. And it just didn't happen. I mean, what happened? Why did we go? What went so wrong with it? Was it just the? Was it?
I wanted to show you.
Was it just the hippie movement? Was it just the Vietnam War? I mean, what went wrong so that we slowed down?
Oh yeah.
Show us this. This is life. This is beautiful.
I just wanted to show you. This is my. Now, this was from 1964. This was the world. This was the World Fair. Okay, May the 1st, 1954. Now I'm going to show you what people thought of the future back in 1954.
Oh, this will be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. From everything from.
Are they already selling, houses on the moon?
Look at that phone.
Oh
That's
my
phone.
Lord!
I'm going to show you. Wait. Look, this is the new style toaster, and this is the new style. This is what they thought the world would be like in 50 years. And then there's a big expose about the World Fair.
Because I guess it affected the way they manufactured things, because they wanted it all looking space related back then.
It was amazing because that's what they thought it was. They thought that it was inevitable and it was going to happen really soon.
Yeah.
Because that was the trajectory at the time. Whoops. There we go.
Oh my Lord!
And what is that a picture of? It's a picture of someone in a VR suit or something.
This says underwater conquest, leaving none of the Earth's riches untapped. GM anticipates utilization of the ocean and its flaws. The tower there is a port for submarines. I guess that's why there was that show about underwater back in the 70s or whatever. It's like this is like a time capsule of what people thought. And also, I ran into an ad for like Sony speakers.
Really?
And they're using the same terms: high fidelity, stereo, blah blah blah. And I'm like, that could have been an ad for the latest, iPod or whatever. And it
still translates today.
It still translates. So, but yeah, this is
wow.
Keep that nice and safe. I really appreciate you showing that on the show. It looks really fascinating.
Yeah.
Oh my Lord. Wow.
Sorry. Yeah, Simo, you want to jump in?
I was just going to say it's funny with the whole space race thing. You'd probably have a more accurate percentage, but how much of the sea has been explored? Like
not that much. Less than 10% or something.
Let's do the most expensive thing possible. Let's go to another planet. Why don't you just put a special boat in the water and explore the ocean floor? Because we're still discovering new species and everything. So, I mean, if you're going to invest some serious money in exploration, just explore the sea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It's a valid point. I mean, I guess we can do both if we stop spending so much money on war or something like that. But yeah, I totally agree. There are still plenty of places on the Earth and beneath the Earth that we have yet to explore. The Earth's a big place. Yeah. We live on the upper mantle.
Isn't one of the deepest, the Mariana
Trench?
We haven't explored that very much. I don't think.
There's more of the ocean, the water on our planet than there is land. I think it's something like less than 10 or 20% that we've explored. We've explored pretty much most of the Mediterranean. That's about it, really. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like everywhere else, like it gets too deep too quick. And the only instruments we really have invented for exploration in a sort of a way that means anything is actually to search for oil and gas deposits. Now we do kind of know what it looks like down there. We know the terrain, and if you know anything about geopolitics of New Zealand, you will realize that we just discovered Zealandia. Did you guys hear about that?
No.
So
No, I did.
if you look up Zealandia, it's a new continent that's been found underneath New Zealand. It stretches from Antarctic somewhere down there all the way up into the Pacific Islands. And because of international law, because of the law of the sea, New Zealand's territory is now going to expand by triple its size. It's actually going to be bumping right up against Australia. So it's not only going to be the Tasman Strait that we normally think of. It's bumping right up there into the Pacific, which makes it really interesting in the geopolitical world, because New Zealand was trying to sneak out of the problems with China and the United States, but now because of Zealandia and because of international law that they've signed up to, they're automatically going to get all of this territory, and they're going to and that expands their territory to that size, which means that they're now being pulled into the politics of the Asia Pacific. For geopolitical reasons, that's interesting, but for fishing territory, for land rights, for everything else that goes into that, New Zealand is going to get massive.
Wow. Where's the tectonic plate? Is that right, going straight through New Zealand at the still? Yeah, it would be.
I will. I can bring up a picture.
Yeah, so New Zealand's popping out right between those two plates. So those two plates are butting up against each other, I guess. Oh no, one's going over the other, and that's what formed New Zealand. Oh, the top bit.
Because they've still got
The
some
visible
active
bit.
volcanoes, don't they? There.
Well, they're along the Ring of Fire. Are they along the Ring of Fire?
Yeah,
Oh, they're-
we're not. They are. Which
Yeah.
which is another point that you were mentioning when you were talking about nuclear energy and us not being along the tectonic plate, is we don't have active volcanoes, except for some reason we have something down here in Melbourne, but not really a proper active volcano. But
Oh, it's a lone fissure, is it?
Wow.
yeah. So it's so that's interesting, but it comes back to your point that, okay, maybe we know some geography about the oceans, but what species are down there? What else is going on down there? Can we utilize it? Can we build cities down there? Can
think
we
that's
farm?
stupid.
Can we should we protect these things, these reefs, these species, or is it too late? And should we just utilize the territory? How do we clean it? How do we manage it? How do we the plastic, the Great Pacific Garbage Patch? It's so big, but can we utilize it in some way that actually makes it useful for people, where we could somehow recycle it or something like that? There's so many questions bubbling around about the ocean, and I think you're totally right to bring up the question of exploration in the ocean, because it's just such a big unknown when we're going to
and it's
space.
right
But
there.
hopefully we can
Well-
do both at once.
I think that's the big problem. Is there's no the resort, as far as resources go, and as far as settlement goes. I mean, neither of those I don't think are on the table, in a large extent. Because if you build something there in the ocean, I mean, you're in. It's kind of like the sword of Damocles. You're about to, at any point, get your structure destroyed by the power of the weight of the whatever it is.
But that's the wonder of exploration. We don't know what we'll find.
Oh no, I agree with that. You don't know what you'll find, but unlike space, where they can get somewhere and they can take the resources, they can mine,
true. Yeah.
and they can settle with the structures are going to be there as long as they have it being airtight, etc. But as far as the ocean, I mean, there's I think those 2 points are off the books mostly. So there's no settlement option and there's no resource to tap except for oil, which is why it's being exploited for oil.
That's true. Because there was a big push recently, last few years, about the coal seam mining. What are your thoughts on that? Because from a political
got so much coal already.
standpoint, no, but coal seam mining can be quite bad for
Efficient.
the environment.
Oh.
But I don't know too much about it, but you seem to be very knowledgeable. So,
Coal seam mining.
yeah.
Yeah, coal seam mining. I think you mean also called fracking, right?
Fracking,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah, fracking.
So yeah, so it's a pretty simple process of drilling you put a drill bit down into the layer. There's a bunch of fractured gas there. Then you pump a chemical down which pushes the gas up, and then you get your energy output that way. The problem with a lot of what they say the environmental cost is when you push the chemicals down into the water. This chemicals down to extract the gas, because you have to like set off a sort of a mini explosion, but not a mini explosion, but you have to crack those layers open in order to extract the gas.
Yeah.
When you push water down there, when you push the chemical down there, that chemical then can leak into the water table, and then when that chemical leaks into the water table, it can disrupt the water. It can poison the water, so to speak.
Yeah.
And also the gas then can also be uncontrolled because you've let the gas out. Now, if you have a proper gas line straight up to your rig, and the gas all just comes straight up the line, that's a-okay, but that hardly ever happens. What happens is sometimes you crack it and the gas can seep all over the landscape and poison the landscape, and that's why you end up with people turning on their taps and having fire come out of their taps. And
That seems like a rather recent technology.
it is a very recent technology. Fracking is since 2010. They've only had the technological skills to discover it, to push it through. You've had huge problems with it in Sydney. Should we do it? Shouldn't we do it? In Sydney, the UK had the same problems, but it was the Obama administration in America that really pushed coal seam gas forward. And actually, by the end of by his last State of the Union address, he was bragging that America had become an energy exporter, right? It'd gone from an energy importer, reliant on Saudi Arabia, to the point where they were, invading Iraq and sending battalions in there to do things or whatever to secure oil contracts and stuff, to the point where they become an energy exporter where they don't even need Middle Eastern oil anymore. So that made America totally energy independent.
Was that around the Florida Keys area? Between
all over, mostly in the north. Actually, mostly north to Ottawa, near Alberta, actually, near Canada.
Is that sort of a technology you would support? Because it's recently new, like within the last decade. But like with anything, it has its ups and downs. But is that something you would sort of go, yeah? I can see the benefits of this, or
it's a hard question because it's multifaceted like anything.
Sure.
If you want America to be an energy independent power, let's say it like this: if you're one of those people that says, I really hated the war in Afghanistan and I hated the war in Iraq and it was all over the oil and it was all over petrodollars and these people got killed for oil, then it's great because, well, people need energy, right? So if we're not going to have any more wars for oil, America getting its own oil is great when you're going to get it from North and South Dakota and not have to go to Iraq. Now, does the environmental costs of getting your own energy from North and South Dakota from this type of method offset the war? So, does the environmental destruction weigh up that factor? Also, if you're talking about America, or Sydney or whatever, you're also talking about jobs. You're talking about the economy, and you're also talking about limiting the amount of war in the future because the more people that are dependent on one region of the world in this context, the Middle East. If we're all dependent on there, that gives somebody a lot of power. Like the Saudis had a lot of power to manipulate international politics through the currency of oil, right? So suddenly these Saudis who they chopped up Khashoggi. Remember that? They chopped the guy up. They threw him in an oven and they killed that guy. They spawned ISIS. They did 9/11. If you want to give this regime more and more power, then we have to be on the team of supporting Middle East oil. But if you don't want that, then we have to say, okay, then fracking's okay. So it's actually a really multifaceted debate about economics, jobs, oil security, energy independence. And a lot of the arguments all boil down to we need a new form of energy independence that's outside of the oil framework and the natural gas framework altogether.
I was going to say that. Did it come about? Did this technology and research come about because we need oil's not going to last forever. We need an alternative. Is that how it came about, would you say?
Yeah, well, there was screaming, all through the 90s, the 80s, the 90s, and well into the 20 teens of peak oil. Remember, we were always going on about peak oil, and then suddenly the peak oil thing disappeared, and that was fracking because up until that point, we had the largest oil well was in Saudi Arabia, and because in Saudi there's a lot of different oil wells, but the main one is the real there's only one really big one that actually even counts for anything in terms of a global distribution for oil, and that actually has gone under halfway, and that's why you heard a lot about peak oil. But because of fracking and because of all the chemical mixtures and stuff, that's actually bought us over 100 years of oil now. The peak oil thing is completely gone out the window because of advances in oil technology in drilling, in drilling into deep earth drilling, plus with fracking. We have well over 100 years worth of oil now to play with. Now, do we want to burn oil for well over 100 years? I don't think so.
No.
Well, that's we had oil only for a few decades, and then fracking came along, and now we've got a lot. But I don't know how you're going to. You have to provide some pathway for those companies to transition, and then if they transition, what's stopping other companies from taking their place? I mean, I don't know what you're going to do there.
So that's my answer. It's a multifaceted question of geopolitics, of environment, of jobs.
It has to. The new technology has to be more cost effective and fiscally more efficient than extracting the oil, and then oil will go away. It's got to be it.
Because how long, like the main oil deposit over there, how long will that last? Do you think?
Well, if you've been following the privatization of the Saudi Aramco. It can't be that long. It's actually the estimates is that it's under half. Now, it's actually a national security issue because the Saudi leaders will not describe the exact amounts. It's literally classed as a national security classified. It's classified, right? It's classified. But the estimations that Bill,
it's an estimate. They wouldn't actually know exactly how much they'd have if it's in the ground and so forth. They'd know how much they've extracted, but.
Yeah, exactly. So the Saudi Aramco deal is a multi-trillion-dollar deal, and that's not even looking as strong as it was. It's going to be the biggest. The privatization of that, the IPO of that company was
huge.
It's huge, but it's falling through because people are starting to cotton on that there might not be as much oil in there as possible. And with this, The reason that they attack Iran, whether it's Israel, Saudis, or the United States, is that they attack Iran it's because if Iran can ever get leverage over Saudi, then it will shut down Saudi's oil supply to the world, right? And then that will stop global commerce. That's been the argument.
Right. So what do you think would happen So when the oil does run out, what will happen to the world economy and the keeping the world running when oil is no longer an option?
The biggest problem, the three biggest problems with lack of oil. I mean, this is why I like you guys at Mind Gap, and we need people with technologies because we need to get self-driving cars. We need to try and push as quickly as we can for a silicon-based, post-silicon-based society, so that we do outrun this oil collapse. Now, that's a big point. But the three things that people don't really think about is, well, transport is obvious right now. If it collapsed tomorrow, it's transport. But it's actually agriculture. Most of the world's fossil fuels, fossil fuels drive agriculture, and are used in the creation of mass agriculture. And also the other thing that we don't really think about too much, but plastics, the normal conveniences and manufacturing processes, keeping machines running. I know there's different grades of oil, whether we're talking about what type of oil, but plastics and the manufacturing process, oil is really important for that. It's pretty much ubiquitous in everything we have in modern society, but agriculture is the other big one. And if we can get cars out of the way, if we can get rid of cars and get them onto electric a grid system, that will knock out the transport argument.
Do they have a alternative for bitumen yet, or no?
Possibly.
Okay. Is that from right?
Yeah, that's a real argument. That's a real talking point. Our world does really run on oil in terms of manufacturing, in terms of transport, and in terms of mass agriculture. It seeps in clothes. It seeps into every component and everything we do. Whether the energy conversion or used as a material to produce things, or as a component to enhance things like mass agriculture. So this is a big important topic, and as a depleting resource, we really can't afford to use it on transport. Just burn it up and turn it into CO2 into the atmosphere for a very long time, because we actually will need it to make plastics, and we will need it to make silicon-based projects and to do all these other things.
Possibly you could have biomass replace some of that, because I mean, fossil fuels is essentially plants, just crushed plants, correct? So there must. I mean, we've also got the E10 fuel now, which is a small percentage is from carbon. Well, the plants are. It's not carbon trapped in the earth, so it's not adding to carbon in the cycle. So if you could get your fuel from biomass, or you can get it from the electrical grid through solar or whatever, then I think that's whittling away at the carbon issue. And then you've also got, I think there's new stuff coming out where it actually captures carbon from the air, and even though that's probably very expensive to do, there might be a whole industry of that sort of thing. Who knows?
Yeah, we actually have one of our USTP officers who comes on here as part of. He's done his PhD, and he's done. Well, I think he's doing his PhD, but anyways, carbon capture, big giant carbon capture machines, which are really, really important to saving the environment. I totally agree with this notion. On the biomass thing, the best place to look on biomass is it's either North or South America. South America produces a lot of sugarcane and a lot of biomass plants, which displace a lot of. They take out a lot. They destroy rainforests in order to do it. Which also depletes it depletes the amount of rainforest, which depletes the amount of diversity that there is ecologically, but also it ruins the soil, because they have to use a lot of fertilizers and things in order to produce a lot of the stuff to make biomass. The other biomass argument is in the United States, where they have a lot of biomass. I think there's a lot of biomass plants all over the United States. They're in a lot of towns, and they use wood chips predominantly to do this. But again, a lot of those wood chips are not harvested through farming techniques. They're harvested from natural forests and things. And a lot of Greenpeace and environmental activists really hate the biomass plants and the biomass industry in the United States and in South America for different reasons. So biomass isn't all cracked up to be, but I do agree with the premise.
What about the what do you call it, multi-level farming with the controlled environment LED lights where you could just fill the desert with this stuff. That's
Yeah,
my-
this is a really good solution. City farms, especially like the innovations in Singapore, we're seeing, because I mean they don't have a lot of space. Hong Kong is the same. We're seeing a lot of innovations in vertical farming in cities, and I think to take stress off of cities and to again limit the amount of transport options. So right now, you know, food is produced in this side of the country and it's trucked inefficiently with a truck all the way to the other side of the country, where it's dumped off and it's put into supermarkets and all this other stuff, when you could just harvest it locally from a vertical farm, which would remove a lot of the logistics, transport logistics, and the technology is coming right down. And the most advanced country in terms of city farming, through genetic engineering, through advanced horticulture and other things, is actually Israel. They have AI devices that scan every single living structure in the farm, right down to the specific weed, and then they enhance that plant, and they enhance the plant specifically to maximize its production, its efficiency in a limited space. So if you want, so the most advanced is Israel, but Singapore, Hong Kong, the United States, China is not yet catching up in this regard because they've been doing their green forest project, their multi-trillion-dollar green forest project, and Africa is the same. They've been concentrating on fighting the Sahara Desert. But no, these are definitely innovations, and the rest of the world will catch up to this. And I expect to see more of this in Australia, but not for a while yet, because we still have issues.
But it's really interesting when you were talking about the agriculture as being, you know, one of the major players who uses a lot of the oil. It's such an obvious thing as soon as you said it, but ever since Roy and I started doing our live stream, talking to different people, just getting people's opinions on things, like that was just so obvious to me. And I'm like, well, if we don't have agriculture, we don't have farming, we don't have food, you know. But I just, talking to all these different people, like it's a real pleasure to be talking to you right now. But
I came to thank you guys for doing what you're doing and talking in the technological sphere and things, because the technology is going to be a way to you know, bring us out a lot of this. It's not a silver bullet. You know, people are going to have to change attitudes. We're going to have to adapt what we eat and what we do and how much we consume and how we think about our planet and everything else like that. But technology will very much assist and push us in a direction. And how we do that, going back to Roy's point right at the start, we have to, because if you're mucking around with super intelligence, or if you're mucking around with AGI, or if you're mucking around with intelligences which are going to be much more intelligent than us, if in any way that they see us as the problem, we're dead. We're all dead. It's finished, because the AI will just say, oh, the most logical way to heal the planet is get rid of all the humans. Hooray! You know, so there's a lot of dystopic Terminator type scenarios, and we don't want that. And if they're brought up through the military complex, which is how a lot of these projects are being developed right now, you can imagine the military mind not being exactly the most stable of minds in order to keep some of these on track for being benevolent, helpful features. But yes, this is why we need you guys in the fight, and that's why I'm very happy to talk to you guys.
No, but it's a different point of view for me personally. It's not like, you know, you try and tell your audience, oh, you'll learn something listening to us. I learn stuff, you know, and I think it's fantastic.
Yeah.
But just going back to sort of the agriculture thing for a second, there was a big push a couple of years ago on the whole carbon credit thing. And I'm not overly familiar, and it seems to have quietened down a bit. But businesses were getting a financial return for carbon credits? Are you familiar with that? Because I really don't know much about it. But there was a big push, carbon credits, and now, like, I don't get it.
colloquially, the carbon credit by farmers is called the tree people, right? Because it's simply companies that go out there and plant trees to offset carbon emissions. So you own a company, you guys own a company, your company produces X amount of CO2, so you pay a carbon credit company X amount to offset a certain amount of emissions, and then you can get that back on tax, or you can get that back on financial credits, or you can brag about that in your newspaper. Or the other thing is what they were trying to set up, which was the cryptocurrencies and all these other stuff. Back in the day, the 2010s, a bit later, 2012s, a lot of these guys were trying to set up carbon credit markets where you would then take your carbon credits, exchange them on a market for some sort of currency, and then trade those around in the marketplace for carbon shares, essentially.
They don't seem to push that very much anymore. They used to push.
No, because what the population realized, and this is what the whole Julia Gillard and Alex Jones and a lot of them, what they realized, and what the people, the conservatives mainly, and the industrialists who didn't want a carbon credit system pushed, rightly or wrongly, is most of the universe is made of carbon, right? So if you get a carbon tax or a carbon credit system, because they go pretty hand in hand, carbon tax, carbon credit system. But let's say a carbon tax, which was the main killer of the whole carbon movement in general. You get a carbon tax, you can essentially tax anything you want across the carbon spectrum, which includes you and me, because we're all like made of everything. Is 90-something% of the universe is created out of carbon atoms. So what the argument was that this is a totalitarian, big brother, top-down, absolute control system, authoritarian crazy talk, where they wanted to control everything in the universe, every single carbon atom. All right, so that was the idea, and then after the sort of failed, it all sort of went away, right? So the whole carbon credit market fell over, the carbon tax fell over, the carbon offset had to go very small, and that's kind of where it happened. So that's why you don't hear about it much anymore.
Well, that's terrible.
That's weird.
We had a way to get trees planted and those sorts of things happening, and they spun it.
Well, you can still do that as a company, but the idea of a carbon tax and a carbon credit system has sort of died down. It doesn't mean it won't be back, but they'll have to resell it in a new way. And the other thing that really scared people was around 2013, 2015. You had the UN through the WHO also at the same time pushing for a global tax on cigarettes. Which people said, well, because if you could, there was a correlation. If you could get a global tax on cigarettes through an organization such as the United Nations, then that would be the doorway to more taxes, right? So, because once you could do a global cigarette tax on health reasons, which is what they were saying, then you could do it. Then you could start putting global taxes on everything. And so people also correlated at the same time with global taxes, and that's why Australia was the first in line. And when Australia's sort of fell over, the rest of the world, especially America, celebrated quite emphatically about our victory over Rudd Gillard, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I have something from left of field here. I know it's very difficult to create a set of taxes and incentives and etc. with one currency to incentivize businesses to do certain things. What do you think of a second currency to allow more flexibility? So let's say there was a second currency where in order to purchase from that currency you had to do certain things, and then in order to buy things you could either use your current currency or you could use that secondary currency, but it was significantly cheaper. Like, for example...
You mean like Bitcoin?
In euros?
Sorry. No, like, for example, let's say you, in order to pay your... Let's say...
you mean domestically? You mean like here in Australia you have two different currency systems?
Yeah, so like let's say to buy a... what's something environmentally friendly? To buy it,
Electric car.
to buy an electric car, it's either $100,000 of conventional money, or you've got this secondary money where it's significantly cheaper to buy that particular item. But in order to earn that currency, you can only earn that currency by planting trees.
I see your point. Now that's sort of more like in a domestic way. It sort of more sounds like a social credit system, not a Chinese style social credit system. I know you don't mean that, but
Oh no, it still has to turn over. Still has to turn over. So still has to be taxed. Still has to have.
Yeah. So actually, you know, I actually this is not a really stupid idea. I mean, I was talking to Ron Pike, who's an Australian. He's been around politics for a long time. In the Conservatives he's been at the centre of water policy for a long time. He's a very old player in Australian politics. I was talking to Ron Pike, and I asked him the same thing as you just said there. So I just said, because he was complaining about the strength of the Australian dollar, you know, the strength of the Australian dollar, it's always too strong, we want to export more. So I said to him, why don't we just get Northern Territory and give them their own currency? Just give Northern Territory their own currency. So now the Northern Territory has its own currency, and that will drop the strength of the Australian dollar significantly. And what will also happen there is the Northern Territory now, because that currency will be very, very weak, because it's not a very strong economy on its own, we can build all our manufacturing in there, because all the companies from all over the world will want to go to put their manufacturing in the Northern Territory. But it's a different idea to what you're saying. And what you're saying will have to take a lot of fleshing out and thinking, and I think you've done that. But I said that other thing, which is a little different to what we're talking about. But
yeah, I mean, so I think an example would be, the benefits of having, say, two currencies. The disadvantage of having one currency, from my understanding, is that an organization with a large enough economic clout can just do whatever they want, because they could just buy whatever they want. The money just talks. Whereas if there was a secondary currency and there was a significant price disparity between what you can buy in one to the other, then there's no conversion. The conversion issue becomes an issue. So it's better for them. It makes more. You've turned it into an economic issue. It makes more economic sense to earn money in that secondary currency, and the only way to earn money in that secondary currency is to do whatever it is that the government mandates is earnable in that currency. And then there's no cross around. There's no crosstalk between the currencies. There could be, but it's not in their advantage to do so.
It's an interesting idea. It's a very interesting idea. There is a thing in economics in the traditional world called dark markets. So, Iran has its own currency, which is essentially the Iranian rial, right? Everybody knows the rial. And it's quite weak on the international scene. But people in Persia, in Iran, don't really use the rial for exchange, because its value is not very stable from day to day. So people actually have their own currency that they use in Iran for day-to-day transactions, and the government uses the rial for international transactions, which has increasing amount of sanctions on it. But they use it. So the domestic circulation of the rial is not really that strong. The Persian people use a different currency to the rial, but there's a correlation there. So yes, technically, if you want to look at it like that in terms of dark markets, absolutely there's a secondary system. But I know what you mean. So you have this Australian AUD. It sits there. It flows around. Yep. It does general goods and services. It sits on the Forex market. The Australian government uses it to transact and do transactions and everything like that. That's all good. But then we have this other market, this other currency, or this other system of points or credits or scores or something. And essentially it's for domestic citizens as a cheapener of environmentally friendly or socially equitable goods or services. And it's done by doing socially equitable, environmentally, or whatever, these good services, these civic-minded community services that are either mandated by the government or has some sort of partnership program or are given accreditation by these things. So, for example, let's take your example. Let's say either picking up rubbish or planting trees, for example. I planted 50 trees, or I picked up this much rubbish. I took it into the guy. The guy said, okay, cool. And he gives you X amount of points. So I go in to get my Tesla hybrid, and I get a government discount essentially through the exchange of these credits. Of my hybrid. So it was $21,000. Now it's only $19,000 thanks to my hard work. And obviously you could give those points away or whatever. So if there was but it also could make an incentive for homeless people, for example. So instead of just being homeless and sitting down because you don't have a job, you could actually walk around and do rubbish pickup and do some of these things. Obviously, we'd have to work out the laws about safety and community safety and public safety and all this sort of stuff. But he could work around, he could earn these credits, and then he could spend these credits at a store for food or for a night's shelter or something.
And you can tune this as well. I mean, if you need more of it, you just increase the exchange rate, and then you've got the ability, like with the Reserve Bank. But in this system, do you need more goodwill and electric cars on the road? Well, there you go. If you don't need it, we'll push it back the other way. I mean, rather than juggling 500 policies for planting trees and this and that or the other. I mean, to me, that just simplifies the whole thing.
But very interesting points. Well, very, very interesting points. Well, I don't know what your guys' time on what you can spend on the show, how much time you've got left. But is there anything else you guys wanted to say or talk about? Because we've been going a little while now, and I can stay longer, but I don't know how much time you guys got to spend.
Can I take one thing and then you say one thing, Simo? Okay, when you were talking originally about I think it was something about neoliberalism. It was about that's right. The people nowadays are just taking. I mean, there's this whole cancel culture, and the whole I'm entitled to this and something like that, and how it's pushing our society to like. They elected someone like Trump, and whether it's through the Facebook algorithm or just general malaise or whatever it is, that's a very poor direction. And I think that maybe I mentioned regulation helping, but maybe a paradigm shift in the way we look at our society is are we putting what type of heroes are we looking at? What are the heroes nowadays? YouTube stars, Instagram models who like take photos of themselves. I mean, I'd rather that look up to like scientists, engineers, explorers. Where are they? I mean, that was my idea of. If you're going to inspire a generation, you inspire them with those sorts of people.
Achievements.
Yeah. And
Not a good photo.
If Facebook algorithm could put more of those people in the spotlight, I mean, that's I mean, it's not like those people don't want to see them. It's just they don't see them. And I think that's something that we could significantly help society with just simple things like, tweaking the Facebook algorithm. Showing people there's more out there than just likes and comments and how many Instagram followers you have, because that's bottom of the barrel stuff.
It's a very good point. We have to implore and encourage people to like people who actually are making a real positive difference in the human experience. I think this is a good point.
Because my two kids, just the stuff that they like on TV is, it's just
it's rubbish.
Yeah, I didn't want to say it, but yes,
I'll say it for you.
And I want them to, to like aim higher. Not because I love them and I want them to do well, but I just wish that they would, want to do more than just play on Minecraft and watch YouTube the whole afternoon, which I am taking steps to stop them from doing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There has to be a new, and it's kind of interesting because when we went into this pandemic, it really was interesting because the people that we've given power to as a society, what you're talking about here, these Instagram models, these YouTubers, these whatevers, then they were the ones, and the Hollywood stars, they were the ones who came straight away out firing and saying, stay home, and made fun of people and sat around in their giant mansions. And then it's suddenly all the gears went into people's heads that we've given them the power to be this arrogant. We've given them this power. We've told them to be arrogant, and now they're being arrogant. And then there's people found it offensive. But wait, you were the ones who empowered these people to be offensive, because when things were okay and things were ticking along normally, you thought it was funny, you thought it was a joke. But then when things got hard, suddenly the light switched on in these people's minds, and they said, maybe we should be empowering people, scientists, entrepreneurs, innovators, actually good politicians, instead of just big loudmouths and liars. Maybe we should have done all these things. But retrospect is always not the best, and it's too late. It's too late by that time. Then you've got these rich, powerful, sometimes arrogant people telling people what to do and how to do it and stuff, and then people get very angry at that. And then you see a lot of the societal dysfunction that you do. America has been rioting now for, I don't even know. It doesn't matter. You can just Google American riots and there's a new one, and it's been constant for months now. My friend said, when's it going to stop? And this was on day 2. And I said, this stuff can go on for years. Look at the French Revolution. Look at a lot of these revolutions that go on. They can go on for years without resolution. It's you empower the wrong people and you get the wrong results. And it's why it's important to encourage and empower people who empower others and empower themselves.
Yes, that's right. We have to. Anyway, so you wanted to.
Oh yeah, I was just a point we were talking about before. Global economics, not really in my wheelhouse, but apart from trading markets with currency, what is there a positive? I'm guessing it's probably all negative. On if I have a car and it's worth 20 grand, and then I go to America and it's still worth 20 grand. What is the problem with making $20 Australian, $20 American, with having a ballpark, every currency is worth the same? Because we were talking before about a new currency.
You're asking, why isn't every currency the same value? So if I go to another country, say America, and I have $20 in my pocket, why can't it buy the same amount of goods and services as in Australia? Why does it depreciate?
Yeah, well, I'm sort of...
Not why does it, but why is...
No, now I think about it, it's probably... It costs more to make over there and rah. But maybe if it's not identical, within $1 or $2 maybe, but is it pretty much all negative if $20 here is $20 there?
No, that would be like a one world currency then. So then that'd be one just global currency. We'd all use the same currency. There would be no forex market. There'd be no foreign exchange market. So it would just be one currency all over the world. We'd call that the UN currency or the IMF currency or the whatever currency, and we could just go anywhere in the world and spend it, and our dollar would buy the same goods or services anywhere around the world as opposed to anywhere else. The only problem with that, I guess, is the amount of power that gives the institutions at the very top of that. If you think the amount of power the RBA or the Federal Reserve or the Bank of China gets from just their countries, where all the money funnels up, well, they create it, but where all the money funnels up and they control the idea of money itself, that gives them a lot of power in their countries. So if you have it on a global system, some institution or some world authority would have a lot of power. Is that democratic? If you care about democracy, there's a lot of questions embedded in that about power distribution and democracy. And
each one helps, raise and lower their own economies. So, you'd have to be able to control interest rates and print money, and you know, there's different saving incentives, and I guess that's why we have separate currencies, and why China keeps devaluing theirs, so that, you know, the other India's not going to pick up the slack. So I mean,
maybe I'll rephrase the question then.
Okay.
Because every country has their own mints and can print their own money, who governs that? Like, why can't we just print another 10 mil?
Oh, you mean fiat?
Oh, I don't know. Like,
So like only 3 or 2% of the global money that we see is physical currency anyway. It's only there's not much. The majority of money as it is digital, and Roy was saying, you know, China devalues their currency. Well, America does too. America prints trillions and trillions of dollars all the time. The other show I have, actually, apart from Arch Report, is Debt Nation, which is just all economics. I mean, we do a lot of tech on there as well, but we talk about a lot of economics, and we talk about a lot of the financial fraud, financial malfeasance that's done by central banks in order to manipulate people and currencies and things and trick them into incentivized geopolitical games. So that's the other show we actually have. So that's a really good one, Simon.
Oh, there. You know, there's a good plug for the show. Right. Well, I could answer the question, but no, go and watch this.
We're bringing on this speaker next week, or in a few weeks. He's from New York. He's talking about the entire U.S. economic system and how things like the Federal Reserve, etc., play into it, and how there's not even any gold there anymore, and it's all based on algorithms and
is he an MMT guy?
What's that? I don't know.
Is he a modern monetary theorist, or is he a something else?
I don't know. I'll
there is a new school of economics called modern monetary theory, which is floating around. They're different to the Paul Krugman economists and stuff like that. But what a lot of people won't tell you, well, I mean, a lot of people know this, but a lot of people won't tell you is you're talking about the Federal Reserve like it's some sort of government entity, like it's linked to the Treasury, when it's not. It's an independent. It's privately owned. It's got private shareholders and all that sort of stuff, going back a long way. So who owns all that and all that, we don't know. So somebody there pretty much has privatized the United States. You got to ask them about that. You ask them about the independent nature of the Federal Reserve. That's been a
from me. I'll get some questions from you to ask him.
Yeah. Greenspan. Everybody acknowledges that it's a private entity, and they brag about it. There's actually a PBS interview where Greenspan is on there arguing, saying it's great that it's a private entity because we're not constrained by government law, you know, like the Treasury is, or, you know, so but that gives some private individuals a lot of unscrupulous, unmitigated, uncontrolled power, where they can manipulate the economy to benefit the subsidiary banks, Merrill Lynch, Bank of America, JP Morgan, you know, and these other banks. So actually, we got a whole show on that, all under Debt Nation. We literally talk about all that stuff all the time. But find out if he's a modern monetary theorist, because modern monetary theory is really interesting. I don't subscribe to it, but it's super, super interesting. And I have a lot of sympathies for MMT. Find out if he's a Keynesian. Most likely he'd be a Keynesian. Keynesian is from Maynard Keynes. It's a.
I heard that term, but I can't remember where I heard it.
Yeah, it's a economics guy who Maynard Keynes, who advocates for sort of middle of the road economics, where let's say we're plunging into a depression or a recession, then you spend a lot of money from the government to get the government to get us out of it, stuff like that. If he's not a Keynesian, then he's got to be an Austrian, or he's got to be some other type of Milton Friedman type. But I doubt that. Not if he's from New York. New York is usually either Keynes or MMT.
Okay. Well, I'll.
Wow, that's a lot of terms right there. Usually for me, I'm just like, he's an accountant or he's not.
We don't do.
I hate accounting.
Yeah.
I hate accounting. No, economics is very different from accounting. Economics is, like Paul Krugman actually says this, and it's true, but economics is about people. It's not about money at all. Money is one of the least things you think about. It's about people, their incentives, what they do with money, and how they interact with the economic ecosystem.
Right.
Awesome.
Wow.
Awesome.
Well, I've had a lot of fun, you
so
guys,
much.
and you guys are
having
great, and I really want to support your mind gap there. I want you guys to do really well. I want you guys to come to me if you need interviews, not from me, but from other people, because I want you guys doing great. And if you can focus on Australia, because I mean, I'm stuck in America. We do a lot of shows with Americans, about Americans, for Americans. We're going to be supporting the Charlie Cam in the United States. But Australia is a big open market in this place. And you already know the Science Party has a lot of great people. You know, Peter Zing, great person. And there's a lot more about that. And Australia has one of the most sophisticated intelligence bases on the planet. We have a very smart population. We have a high percentage of smart people here, sophisticated people, but we just we don't know how to utilize them, and we don't use them very well. And the government does stupid things like defunds the CSIRO, which makes it incredibly hard to utilize our great brains here in Australia. So that's very sad, and that's very disappointing, and that's one of the very bad things that Tony Abbott and his administration, his government did. It's the defunding of the CSIRO. If you're looking for a campaign, very, very good campaign to get on.
I would pass by the CSIRO every day when I went to uni. There would be the CSIRO doors at Macquarie University, MPC. Maths, physics, science, and engineering, electronics.
I used to go there and do classes when I was in primary school. They had a little after school thing.
The Australian population, it's like, yeah.
we got to get it back. It was a fantastic institution, and it's been demolished by these governments. And this is not the right time. This is not the right time. And we invented Wi-Fi or whatever it was. So we can do that again.
Yeah, I think there was a speech about some guy from there. And it was he got bought out by Cisco.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Wow. That's nuts.
Chips talking to each other in very close proximity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. So the Australian aspect of this, what you guys are talking about, very open. It's understudied. It's all dominated by the ABC, which is public programming. There's not much more on that. Meow Meow. You guys would love Meow Meow. Have you guys met Meow Meow? Do you know about Meow Meow?
The name rings a bell, but not overly familiar.
I reckon. Are you guys in Sydney?
Yes.
Yeah.
You guys could do an in-studio interview with Meow Meow. I'll try and get him on. Get him for you. He's a biohacker. So what he did in Sydney, he did the famous. He was the guy who put the chip in his arm for the transport for you. You've got some sort of transport thing there, right? What's it called?
The
Opal passport.
Opal card.
Yeah.
Opal card. Yeah. So what Meow Meow did was Meow Meow inserted an Opal card into his hand, and then scanned on and off on the train and used his chip in his hand, and then the courts said that he was illegal because he destroyed government property in order to do this. He won in court. He sort of won in court, It sort of lost. He had to take it out, but he sort of got a fine or something very small. Talk to him about that case. But he's right on the frontiers of a COVID vaccine, actually. He's got his own biolab there in Sydney. He's part of the Science Party.
Definitely want to talk to this guy.
Very, very cool dude. Closely working with a lot of the agriculturalists, the biohacker agriculturalists there that are doing manipulations with cows and stuff like that. The biohacking people are very interesting, and talk to Meow Meow and you'll get this view into this whole strange world of biohacking. It's very, very interesting.
Wow, I'm down. Let's do that.
There'll be some
Cool.
applications for that.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming on the show. It's been so much fun and all that. And I hope
you.
I didn't keep you too long. And really want to support your work over there at MindGap. And I hope you guys do really well and have a lot of fun along the way. And I want to thank you for coming on.
Oh, yeah. Simo, say hi to Steel. Steel.
Oh, it's all good.
Steel. There you go. Just say hi to him. There you go.
Oh, there we go. I'm the pretty one.
I like your hat.
Oh, thank you.
And Rode microphones. I think that's what I got. Rode's great.
Yeah, Rode are good. If they want to sponsor us, that's fine. I'm down for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you
Now,
very much.
you could do beer because you're a podcast crew. You could do a drinking podcast if you're up to. Do you like drinking?
We had some
yeah.
crafty on before. We had a craft beer on. What was that beer?
Um,
We still got it in the fridge.
yeah, I can't remember. But
was by
yeah,
Chris
I'm
Needy.
down for product testing if it's beer related. 100%.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. I mean, you never know. In Sydney, there's a lot of different craft beers, and that Melbourne too. I can't do it because I don't really have the right setup. I don't have the buddy system that you guys got. But I could imagine if you guys play your cards right, getting some sort of product testing or beer sponsorship or alcohol sponsorship. You could argue that it was to do with microbiomes or something.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's a community service, so it's a community service. But yeah, no, I did want to jump on so you could put a face to the name.
Yeah.
No, I
But,
appreciate your
Thank you
comments.
so much for having us on. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I get a bit distracted. I want to talk about this, then that, then this.
He won't
then
stop
that.
talking. He won't
Yeah.
stop talking.
I
That's
won't
why we
stop
love
talking.
him. So if I don't know what to say, he's off.
Yeah, I'm straight in there. No,
Good.
but it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your time and chatting with us. And it's great fun. I love this whole
Yeah.
podcast live streaming platform.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I love it too, and and I want to thank you guys. I want to support you, and I want to say, good luck, and we'll send you people, and learn lots, and keep in touch, and we'll see you again soon.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right, that's MindGap. Make sure you head over to MindGap in order to get all the MindGap podcasts that are coming your way, especially a very interesting one from New York about economics. So that should be really interesting. For the rest of our viewers, I want to remind you, Charlie Cam, we're gearing up to talk to Charlie Cam and support his campaign for the president of the United States. So that's the campaign that we're going to be working on very soon. Big meeting coming up on Saturday, and we'll see you all again here on the Archer Report next week. Thank you, everybody. So long, so well.
Bye.
See ya.
See ya.
Alone,
Oh my God.
uncertainty,
Yeah. So I guess we'll just stay on until the whole thing ends.
fear,
Hey.
in a strange place.
I'm like, well, what about this?
Something stops
What
you,
about this? What about that?
challenges test your
So he's
strength.
in America.
Oh, I don't know. We will see.
A rush of
We
adrenaline,
shall see. Yeah, we'll see the outro. It's
the
great.
light, the air.
I don't know. I'm just gonna wait.
It is the
Just
moment.
wait.
You elevated.
Gotta go pick up the kids now. Archer Report. There you go. Steel Archer.
Life.
I think
We have
that's
goals that depend on bodies and brains. We work and learn better. We love better.
it. Or do
And our
I
bodies and our brains
just,
function better.
press cancel?
At Thrivus, our goal is to help
Do I
you
press-
improve your brain and body, to help you achieve your goals. So that's the
Encode?
power we
Oh,
encapsulate.
this is an ad. This is an ad for.
Ready for help with your
This
goals?
is Skype.
Visit Thrivus.com.
No, we didn't. It was Messenger.
Oh yeah, it was Messenger.
That's like, when I was driving.
Thrivers. Thrivers.com. There we go. Yeah, I gotta pick him up just down the road. So.
Oh, no, but they're not quite.
No, no. Okay.
Roger, main B interval. Okay, stand by, 13, we're looking at it.
Oh, wow, fucking hell, man. You know when you do
I
a
think
job.
we've been on for 2 hours 30 minutes.